All right, everyone. So Eric Bischoff talked about the possibility of a return by Brock Lesnar. This is what he said. No way to know, man. Brock's unique. Brock's got enough money he could live the next three lives. His kids will never be able to spend the money that Brock has made. And beyond the money, Brock has farming. That's his joy. That's his passion. That's where Brock is at peace based on what I've heard. I don't know Brock that well. And man, I don't know he doesn't need to. So it's a question of does he want to? And at some point, you just don't want to anymore. What's Brock going to do that he hasn't done a dozen times in the last dozen years? So, I mean, that's a pretty interesting take on it, right? I think, from what I understand, everything that he's saying there is true. Um, I think Brock, and obviously this lawsuit, right? The lawsuit's going to have a lot to do with that, right? The findings, whatever WWE has found internally or whatever will be found through this investigation, that's all going to come into play here as well. I'm not going to speculate on any of it or get into that aspect of it. The way I'm going to look at this is, just based off a Brock, let's say Brock was going to return or not return based on him wanting to. That's what we'll focus on here because all that other stuff is just an unknown. We don't know how any of that's going to play out. But I know this, Brock is going to be one of those guys who, if he does return, the audience is going to love him, and it's going to be, whether he's a babyface or a heel, the excitement level is what I'm talking about, is going to be high. And I think WWE, the one thing we know about this company, regardless of if Vince is at the helm or now, with Triple H or whoever is at the helm, is that these guys always come back. I mean, it just is something that they always do. And the beauty of what Brock does when he comes back is that he's a guy that will come back and he'll have a 6 month rivalry or a year long rivalry, and then he can go back to doing what he wants to do. Like, it's not this thing where it's like, okay, I got to decide, am I going to put 5 years back into this company or 1 year back into this company? I could show up on two Raws and do every pay-per-view, and WWE will basically be fine with it. Like, that's kind of the way wrestling works. I mean, they have guys like Logan Paul who, Logan Paul shows up when he wants to show up in terms of when WWE has him scheduled, but they work around the schedule of Logan Paul so that he could show up, and they would do the same with Brock. So he's right in terms of the money aspect. Definitely isn't going to be the driver of it, right? He probably doesn't really care about that, but I think it was a big deal, and we did a video on this when it happened. It was a big deal when Triple H was asked about a Brock return, and Triple H's response was, "Remember, this is with the lawsuit and everything. It's up to Brock, basically." That was his kind of reaction to it, and I don't know. Maybe they've walked some of that stuff back. I know Meltzer had a report that was like, "Well, it hasn't been cleared with legal," so that was maybe just an off the cuff kind of comment. But I think it still matters. I think it still matters, right? That Triple H, that was his initial reaction to it, which means that if Brock showed the slightest bit of interest, right, they would be like, we're going to make a storyline to fit you in. And I do think he would be, he's a perfect kind of opponent for any young guy you're building because he's viewed in a way that is just so dominant, right? When Brock Lesnar comes out, you're like, okay, this guy is brutal. I mean, remember that match he had with Cena where it was just a brutal beatdown of John Cena for like a good portion of it. I can't remember a time, and obviously wrestling is whatever scripted and all of that stuff, but sometimes even when it's scripted, you're like, okay, I get what they're presenting here, so I feel like it's a dominant thing. But his beatdown of Cena for basically the entire match was one of the most dominant things I've ever seen. It almost felt like that Wyatt Six thing we saw on Raw. That the beauty of that match was it just felt like it was the most real thing in the world. Like it was just a real beatdown. And so because of that, I think Lesnar is someone who, there's not like a bunch of guys that can give you the pop and the return that Lesnar would be able to. So I think what Bischoff is saying here is 100% true, which is it's up to him. Like it's basically up to him. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.